So as I was saying, the amount of words that people were exposed to when just talking to somebody and in day-to-day oral communication was really limited. And it really wasn't until humans had an ability to store words and develop writing that we started to really expand not only on our vocabulary but being able to share ideas that weren't just locally based. So being able to link all the different, all the global knowledge basically. So it kind of started like that. What was I going to talk about next? So yeah, that was basically the primary means. I mean, we used hand gestures and stuff like that. Hello, right on, stuff like that was also incorporated into our language set. And however, there's a couple of obviously limitations because there's only so much information that one can keep in one's head. So you could only pass on certain information, and also people aren't perfect. They're not like the written word where when you write it down, it kind of exists as it is. And however, when we try to remember a story from somebody, we've all done it, where you start on one side and you start telling a secret and you go around in a big circle, and by the time it gets to the end, it's nothing like what you thought. So that's the very same thing about oral language versus writing language or written word. So as I said, writing was invented for accounting purposes. So what did really the first written language look like? Well, they call it cuneiform, and cuneiform or triangles and dashes, they're all combined into different combinations in order to do meaning. And so that's where we actually started having symbols that represented ideas. I mean, we do it now. I mean, if you take a look at our alphabet, we have a series of symbols, and on their own, they don't really mean anything. However, when you can combine them, they take on a different meaning and a unique meaning. And so we recombine the letters, and you get another meaning. And that's one of the powers of actually the alphabet system, is that you combine the alphabet system, and you can actually do other languages. Some other languages that aren't alphabet type based are more symbolic. They have a tendency not to be able to do that. That is, represent languages other than their own. A classic example is in Japanese, most words are vowel or consonant and vowel, so they always end in a vowel. So you can't say Richard because D only ends in a consonant. So to say my name, for example, another thing is they don't have another word. They don't have an R. So they have the closest equivalent would be Ri, which is kind of like Lee, but it's a little bit different with a little bit of a roll to the Li. Anyway, my name translated into Japanese or said in Japanese is Richado, and because they can't say Richard, so that ch doesn't exist. Anyway, long story short, orally based languages had their limitations, and it looked like cuneiform based. As I said, what did people first write on? At the beginning, they were using clay tablets, wet clay tablets, and they were using stamps, and it made it a lot easier to write the language, and you could do it that way. And it also was really consistent, and it looked easy to read, and that kind of thing. And in some other regions, like for example in China, it's more pictographic. That is, it was a symbol, kind of like hieroglyphics. How that takes on a little bit of a image that as it changes and it becomes stylized and simplified, it looks a little bit different than the original script, but you can kind of still see the meaning. And then there's languages that combine both, like phonetic based, that means sound based, and picture based, and you put those two together, and you have combinations, and that's Japanese like that. And of course you got script like, which is things like Hindi. So people first started writing on clay tablets, but of course those are brittle and they break, and it's hard to transport, and they get heavy and all that kind of stuff. So when paper, in the form of paper invented in China, or papyrus, which was also was produced in Egypt, which was more of a reed that was split open, and when they had that, I mean, that made it a lot easier. So you could write stuff down. You just found inks and stuff like that, and it made storing the information a lot easier. But they kind of had accordion type papers, and they'd have a little thing on there and a little note on what it meant. You kind of unfurled it, so you got the single page of writing. But a next really major invention was like in order to take that and put it into like a book form, so you could flip pages and store it on the outside, kind of protected the inside, and that made transporting information a lot easier. Oh yeah, before that, of course, was the scroll, where you had a tube and you rolled it up and you stuck it in a tube and you sent that. And of course, those are big and cumbersome, and it's hard to tell what's in them and all that kind of stuff. So really, the next major invention was the manuscript, or the codex. That's CODEX, or book, another word for book. So that was a major invention because you could store information and kind of find it, and then basically for the next bunch of years, we figured out ways of making it easier to find information, like topics, and we had numbers on the page. That was a big invention, and they started doing things like that. But up until that point, people were also like handwriting the book out. So monks would sit in a bunch of tables, and mostly what they were reproducing were religious works or the Bible, and so they would sit there and write that stuff out by hand. Expensive and prone to error and all that kind of thing. So there weren't really a lot of books. The only people that could really afford books were the rich people. And the poor people, they couldn't read. Like I said, 95% of the population was probably illiterate. Up until what happened was really the next major invention that really impacted writing and text was the printing press, which happened in 1448 by a guy named just a second. What's his name? Gutenberg. And he basically took the existing technology that was around and put it together, and it was like a wine press. But what he really invented was not really the first printing press, which was really in China that was first invented, but the first one with movable type that you could move around and recombine. And with the alphabet, of course, that you had a little plate of that stuff, and it made printing a lot easier to do. And then there was just simply an explosion of information, because it wasn't restricted to rich people who could hire like monks to sit at tables to write religious books. It also expanded outside of religion and really led to the Reformation and Martin Luther and a bunch of other things, because all of a sudden everybody could read and everybody had access to the information, and you didn't have to go to one person like the priest or whatever for information for them to like interpret what it meant. You could actually read it yourself and go, this is what I think it means. So that's when really literary studies or analyzing of writing happened. And 1448 was right around the time that William Shakespeare was around, and of course England was doing pretty good. Elizabeth was queen, and they had a really big pirate ship type army, and they traded a lot of goods. And it was in that time that Shakespeare really came to be, and that's one of the reasons why we study Shakespeare and drama. So thanks for watching. And once you finish doing this, if you could just click on the quiz link, I'd appreciate that. Thanks.